Number 5, Victor Gard. Now, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but I place a lot of belief and trust in experiences that come from pilots, since they are legitimately trained to recognize the unknown in the air and remember everything about what they see. Hey, my ADHD brain can never ever remember that much unless it's a hyperfixation, and even then, I wouldn't trust it to remember anything on command when I'm overwhelmed. Back in 1935, when he was a wing commander, Sir Victor Gard was instructed to inspect an inactive airbase located in Drem near Edinburgh in Scotland. While flying over it, Sir Goddard found the airbase to be in a poor state with cattle grazing on the wild grass that had now forced its way through the tarmac. Like, I swear the entire place was in complete shambles. Later on, while flying his plane though, he got into a bit of trouble thanks to the harsh weather conditions, and to avoid an accident, Sir Goddard decided to fly back to the abandoned airbase till the weather cleared out a little bit. As he approached the airbase, the torrential rain oddly and very abruptly gave way to bright sunshine when Sir Victor noticed that the airbase was not only in mint condition, but in use. He spotted mechanics wearing blue overalls working on the yellow planes parked on the runway, but he was unable to recognize a single craft on the base. There was no way the place could have gone from decrepit to fully renovated and operational in half an afternoon, and more importantly, these guys weren't wearing the khaki-colored uniforms that were a norm at the time. Oh, and by the way, the Air Force at the time painted all their planes in silver, not yellow. Completely baffled by what on earth was going on, Sir Goddard got the shock of his life 4 years later. So Europe was war-torn, and he happened to visit Drem again. But this time he saw everything he saw 4 years back in 1935. The same people in blue overalls servicing yellow planes, and he even found the plane he couldn't recognize before, now identifying it as a Miles Magister. I've had like a glimpse into the future before myself, but never a slip that detailed. Honestly, out of the entire list that I've curated for y'all today, this is one instance where history was actually able to prove it. So, time slip confirmed. Number 4, the Mandela effect. Okay, think about this one. Really think about it. The Mandela effect is a phenomenon where a large group of people remember something differently from how it occurred in reality. It is named after Nelson Mandela, as some incorrectly remembered him dying in prison in the 1980s. Now, while some people say the Mandela effect is just due to confirmation bias or misremembering, others entertain more speculative explanations, such as, parallel universes, or in my beliefs, time slips, time travel. Hey, what's the first rule of time travel? Never touch anything, because it could impact the future and spiral. So what if the Mandela effect is just leftovers from people traveling back in time and messing with the past? Ergo, affecting the present timeline. Let's start with the most famous example. Even though, Nelson Mandela didn't pass away until 2013, many people remember him dying in the 80s while in prison. And some folks even remember his widow giving a speech after his death, vividly. So what if somebody went back in time and saved him from passing, ergo changing the timeline? Okay, look, if you don't believe the big thing, just look at the amount of small things that have changed over the years. Berenstain Bears, which is one I remember having totally different spelling, the Monopoly Man having a monocle, the creator of Peanuts having a T in his last name, that one boggled my mind. Fruit of the Loom having a cornucopia in their logo, which looks much better. Luke, I am your father. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Like, trust me, I could be here for ages listing all the obvious examples off. It makes sense to me. The times just sort of slipped and warped and changed.
Number 3 on this list is Valerie Lukyanova. Valerie is a Ukrainian model who is famous for her uncanny resemblance to Barbie. She is literally known as the real-life Barbie doll, and it truly does stick, folks. She naturally looks a ton like Barbie as is, and then with a few contact lenses and some well done makeup, it is pretty ridiculous. Anyways, she has been known to have some pretty interesting opinions as well. One of these opinions, or maybe experiences, if it actually did happen, is that she is a time-traveling space alien who has come from the future, and she's been sent here with the purpose of helping and changing the human race. Now, she's come out and spoke about this in Vice's online series, My Life. She believes that she is from the future, and she's supposed to change the human race from the human consumer to the human demigod. Which is kind of strange because she markets herself like Barbie, a clear signature of westernized consumerism. Either way, she is from the future and is trying to turn us into demigods. How we are going to become demigods, or what that would even look like, is anyone's best guess, I'd say. She also didn't say what time period she came from, so who knows how far in the future she's from. If, of course, she actually is from the future and this all wasn't some made-up publicity stunt. Number 2 on this list is the Hipster. This one is super weird, and I could totally buy into it, honestly. Bustle says, in the early 2010s, a photograph depicting the 1941 reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia in Canada went viral for seemingly depicting a man that looked just a bit too modern to have been photographed in 1941. He looks, in fact, like a time-traveling hipster. Graphic t-shirt, textured sweater, sunglasses, the entire works. The photo hadn't been manipulated, the original can be seen here. So, what the heck's going on? Well, Snopes has plenty of reasonable explanations for the man's appearance. Each item he's wearing, for example, could very easily have been acquired in 1941. Others have also backed up those facts. But the bottom line is that it's never been definitively debunked, so the idea that this photograph could depict a man from our time who had traveled back to 1941, it still persists. And I'm gonna be honest here, folks, I disagree with Snopes on this one. Everything about that guy looks like he came from just down my hall. Like, I could totally see that dude sitting in a park just reading a book or taking pictures and 100% buy it. I think he's from the future, but comment down below what you guys think. And finally, number 1 on this list is Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain. Both of these people have claimed to go back in time before. Bustle says, in 1901, 2 English women, Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, took a vacation to France. While they were there, they visited the Palace of Versailles, and while they were at Versailles, they visited what's known as the Petit Trianon, a little chateau on the palace grounds that gave Marie Antoinette a private space for her to hang out and do whatever it was that a teenage queen did when she was relaxing back then. But while they were there, they claimed they saw some odd occurrences. They said that they spotted people wearing anachronistic clothing, heard mysterious voices, and saw buildings and other structures that were no longer present and indeed hadn't existed since the late 1700s. Finally, they said that they caught sight of Marie Antoinette herself drawing in a sketchbook. They claimed to have fallen into a time slip and briefly transported back more than 100 years before being jolted back to the present by a tour guide. Now, this is pretty scary if it's true, because they didn't even attempt to do this. Imagine if you're just walking down the street. You blink, and when your eyes open again, you are walking down the same street, but 1,000 years prior. Now, this story could be totally fabricated, but the pair seemed adamant that it actually happened. Who knows? Maybe there is a time slip in the palace where you can fall back to the 1700s.
Kicking off today's list, in 5th place, we have A Tale from a Pilot. Now, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but I place a lot of belief and trust in experiences that come from pilots, since they are legitimately trained to recognize the unknown in the air and remember everything about what they see. My ADHD brain could never, ever remember that much, unless it's like a hyperfixation, but even then I wouldn't trust it to remember anything on command when I'm overwhelmed. So back in 1935, when he was, a wing commander, Sir Victor Gard was instructed to inspect an inactive airbase located in Drum, near Edinburgh in Scotland. While flying over it, Sir Goddard found the airbase to be in a poor state, with cattle grazing on the wild grass that had now forced its way through the tarmac. The entire place was completely in shambles. Later on that day, while flying his plane, he got into a bit of trouble thanks to the harsh weather conditions, and to avoid an accident, Sir Goddard decided to fly back to the abandoned airbase till the weather cleared out a bit. Just take your chances. As he approached the airbase, the torrential rain oddly and very abruptly gave way to bright sunshine. When Sir Victor noticed that the airbase was not only in mint condition all of a sudden, but in use. He spotted mechanics wearing blue overalls working on the yellow planes parked on the runway, but was unable to recognize a single aircraft on the base. There was no way the place could have gone from decrepit to fully renovated and operational in like half an afternoon. And more importantly, these guys weren't wearing the khaki colored uniforms that were a norm back then. Also, the Air Force painted all their planes in silver, not yellow. Completely baffled by what the heck was going on, Sir Goddard got the shock of his life 4 years later. Europe was war-torn and he happened to visit Drum again. But this time he saw everything he saw 4 years back in 1935. So the same people in blue overalls servicing yellow planes, and he even found the plane he couldn't recognize before, now identifying it as a Miles Magister. I've had a glimpse into the future before myself, but never anything that detailed. I just predicted like one small event on the grand scheme of things. Thank goodness he didn't go mad from it, because I know I would have. In 4th place, we have the time-traveling hipster. No. I'm not talking about the 11th Doctor. I'm more partial to the 9th. I digress. In 2004, a black and white photo in the Their Past Lives Here exhibit at the Braylorn Pioneer Museum in British Columbia came to be and went largely unnoticed until the collection was digitized in 2010. The photo in question showed a crowd of spectators at an event, and on the back there was a note stating that it was taken in 1941 at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia. Nobody knows who took the photo, and the identity of anyone in the crowd is also completely unavailable. So when the collection made its way online, several internet users picked up on an oddity in the bridge photo. Popular websites got wind of the mystery and started republishing the photo in question. So you're probably asking by now, okay Alexa, you've said photo enough, what's so special about it? There's a single man in the crowd who looks completely out of place. Kinda like how I would look in a church right now, dressed like this, or at my job where I wear a uniform. The man's appearance is way too modern to fit within 1947. He's wearing a modern t-shirt and modern sunglasses, and he's holding a camera that's way too small to have existed in 1941. Like, think those little digital cameras from the early 2000s. I used to have one. His appearance amongst men and women dressed much more formally, and in keeping with the era, has led him to be dubbed the time-traveling hipster. Many folks, myself included, are pretty sure that the man was an imposter sent from the future to take photos of the South Fork Bridge for some unknown purpose. I know where y'all are going here with your brains, but Alexa, what if it was photoshopped for attention? Maybe the museum needed funding. As if I was gonna leave that stone unturned. The first piece of evidence to support its authenticity is actually from a second photo. It's a photo of the same event, but from a different angle. It was discovered shortly after the first one went viral. It is part of the John Wixkin collection and is captioned, "Opening of the new bridge at South Fork." So this close-up shows the same modern-looking man from the original photo. Sure, it might be like a stretch, not completely impossible, to say that both photographs are fakes, given their different origins. Thankfully, we have more evidence of the original photograph's authenticity. In December of 2010, Evgeny Balamotenko and his colleague from Russian television channel NTV determined it was real and unedited with the help of a museum staffer. So my theory is that someone wanted to test out a time machine in a way that, he could have visible proof of it working in the future, but without invading a massive event. Like, imagine if everyone with, like a time machine went to the opening day of Disneyland. That would be pretty obvious. So they just pick something random, and here we are. Number 3, the chronovisor. No, this isn't some kind of weird hat or goggles. Italian Benedictine monk Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have used a time viewer which could film the past without sound, and used it to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion of Jesus and view scenes from ancient Rome, including a performance of the lost play Thyestes. Or is it Thyestes? Let me know in the comments. Now, this was mostly scrubbed away in history until 2002, when author Father François Brun swore in his book, Le Nouveau Mystère du Vatican, that the chronovisor not only exists, but that he learned about it in the early 1960s. A day after he met scientist priest Father Pellegrino for the first time, the two were sailing along the Grand Canal of Venice, discussing, biblical interpretations, when Ernetti explained that theories and interpretations were unnecessary, when you could just see the truth for yourself. Which, I wish! It would make so much more sense in life. He explained to Brun how the chronovisor functioned, allowing the viewer to both see and hear events of the past and future. And hey, if you don't believe my word, his full account is included in Brun's book. With a little digging, researchers will find first mentions of the chronovisor in a 1972 article published in the Italian magazine La Domenica del Corriere, entitled "A Machine That Photographs the Past Has Finally Been Invented." Belonging to the Vatican, the chronovisor time machine is heralded as one of the papacy's best kept or worst kept secrets. The device is said to be replete with 3 precious alloys, cathodes, dials, levers, and that it has the ability, once again, to display a myriad of historic events in biblical and Roman history. Acting as a sort of television, the chronovisor has even supposedly verified the existence of Jesus Christ and once again broadcast that crucifixion. Ouch! The chronovisor time machine is claimed to have been invented in the 1950s by a dedicated and secret team of Italian scientists, including physicist Enrico Fermi and, yep, our favorite, Ernetti. Critics may take credibility issues with the fact that Ernetti eventually became a priest, but this critic doesn't take issue with that. More so that the Vatican is hiding a tool that could be used to help solve unanswered crimes around the world and help people. Imagine how many killings could be solved, and how many families of lost people could have answers. And just, I don't know, I think it'd be pretty cool to look back through history and just be like, oh, so that's what actually happened, instead of the fan fiction we often read in our textbooks. Number 2, Project Rainbow. The legend of the Philadelphia experiment, a story that has permeated paranormal lore for decades, is a fascinating tale of alleged military experimentation in science fiction-like events that unfolded around the USS Eldridge at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in 1943. This narrative has captured the fascination of many, myself included. The story first emerged in the late 1950s when an ex-merchant mariner named Carl M. Allen sent a book filled with handwritten annotations to the U.S. Office of Naval Research. The annotations appeared to detail a heated debate among multiple individuals about Morris K. Jessup's book on unidentified flying objects, and they touched upon alien races and propulsion for flying saucers. A mysterious figure named Jemmy was at the center of this discourse. Using the name Carlos Miguel Allende, introduced the concept of a dangerous experiment allegedly conducted by the U.S. Navy in 1943. This experiment involved rendering the USS Eldridge invisible and teleporting it from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. Allen claimed to have witnessed this event while serving on another ship. The story took an even stranger turn though when two officers at the Office of Naval Research took an interest in the matter. They showed Jessup the annotated book and noticed similarities in the handwriting between the annotations and the letters they received from Allen. Over the years, this tale gained popularity through various iterations in books and films. Most notably, Charles Berlitz's and William L. Moore's book, The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility, and the subsequent 1984 time travel film titled The Philadelphia Experiment. Some individuals even claim to have been aboard the USS Eldridge during the alleged experiment, further blurring the lines between fact and fiction. And despite the enduring allure of the experiment, it kind of remains a contentious story. The US Navy has consistently denied its existence, go figure, stating that the experiment contradicts well-established facts about the USS Eldridge and is rooted in non-existent physics. I think we all know at this point to take any government statements with a pound of salt. Many aspects of the story, such as the supposed side effects on the crew, the teleportation, and the invisibility, yeah, they might lack concrete evidence, but they've got quite a few anecdotal accounts and pretty valid information. Ultimately, the truth behind this legend remains elusive, nestled in the shadowy realms of speculation and intrigue, but I believe it. Number 1. Glocke. So since this device happens to be from World War II, I apologize in advance for how nonsensical I might sound, since the interwebs don't really like the name of the evil dictator at the time or his Yahtzee followers, if you get my drift. In his 2001 book, The Hunt for Zero Point, author Nick Cook identified claims about Glocke as having originated in the 2000 Polish book, The Truth About the Wonder Weapon by Igor Witkowski. Nick described Igor's claims of a device called the Bell, engineered by Yahtzee scientists, that was a glowing, rotating contraption rumored to have some sort of anti-gravitational effect, and be a time machine. According to Nick, Glocke was bell-shaped, about 12 feet high and 9 feet in diameter, and incorporated two high-speed, counter-rotating cylinders filled with a purplish, liquid, metallic-looking substance that was supposed to be highly radioactive, with the code name Zerum 525. He recounts claims that scientists and technicians who worked on the Bell and who did not die of its effects or, disappeared mysteriously were wiped out by the SS at the close of the war, and the device was moved to an unknown location. Which, honestly, those all check. Nick proposed that SS official Hans Kammler later secretly traded this technology to the US military in exchange for his freedom. Historical theorists are pretty sure that a concrete ring called the Henge near the Wenceslas mine that was built in 1943 and vaguely resembled Stonehenge was used as a launch pad for the Bell. Igor's book was translated to English in 2003, and he claimed to have discovered evidence of Glocke in a review of World War II-era documents that were declassified by the Polish government, which led him to additional research via archives and interviews. The first document, allegedly supplied to Igor by an unnamed Polish government official, was from the war crimes trial for General Jacob Sporenberg, who supposedly confessed to ordering the deaths of around 60 people who had knowledge of the secretive project. Kurt de Bus, Werner von Braun, and Walter Gerlach were also allegedly implicated in the Glocke research. Igor claims this device was organized under a division of the Waffen-SS and operated mainly at facilities in Lower Silesia. Glocke was conceived in early 1942, and active experimentation began in mid-1944. Prisoners from the Gross-Rosen concentration camp were exposed to radiation from this machine, resulting in many deaths and health problems. Survivors of the camp reported witnessing tests of this machine, reporting a bright bluish light from the object. Igor believes Zerum 525 was likely an irradiated form of mercury used in the creation of a form of plasma that was intended as a weapon and/or propulsion system, and which would have been capable of distorting space and time. So what you're telling me is there is indeed a time-traveling device out there. I just need to find it. Game on.
Jumping into number 5, we have Project Montauk. It is a fact that until 1981 there was a US Air Force base in Montauk, New York, at the eastern tip of Long Island. But this site has been famously steeped with some pretty bold claims. It was the site of a series of top secret government time travel experiments. allegedly. In the 1980s, writer Preston Nichols claimed that he recovered repressed memories of working on one of these projects. Now this is where it all turned a little bit Stranger Things. Get the egos at the ready. I'm ready. He claimed that the project focused on child experiments, with one child even gaining psychic abilities. Another claim, well, they created a time portal to 1943. Not just any moment in 1943 though. This time portal opened up into the USS Eldridge, the subject of another notorious government project, the Philadelphia experiment. Essentially, the experiment focused on turning naval ships invisible, but it ended up with some timey-wimey stuff and drove the whole crew insane. Good. Great.
Coming in at number 4, we have Jophar Vorin. Sounds like a side character from Tatooine, right? Well, you wouldn't be too far off. In 1850, a man named Jophar Vorin was found in Frankfurt on Oder, Germany, washed up seemingly from nowhere. Jophar spoke very broken German, which already made his outlandish claims even more difficult to understand. This guy claimed he was from Laxaria and spoke the ancient languages of Laxarian and Abrahamian. What are they? Well, nothing to you and I, but to Jophar, Laxarian was a written language of the clerical order of Laxaria, which he claimed was a Christian religion known as Ispatian, practiced in the mysterious land of Laxaria, situated hundreds of miles away from Europe. Jophar said he was searching for his long-lost brother, but was shipwrecked along the way. Unlucky for him. This guy didn't recognize any maps at the time and claimed that the world that he knew it had 5 sections: Sacria, Alsfar, Aslar, Auslar, and Joplar. Sound crazy? Well, probably, but the German authorities didn't think so. He was taken to Berlin to be questioned and studied, and well, no one has heard from him since.
Wow, wow, wow. I liked that. That's very X-Files. Is that X-Files that I just did?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Was it?
I think so.
No?
Well, I liked it anyway. Good on him.
In third place, we have the Glocke device. Since this device happens to be from World War II, I apologize in advance for how nonsensical I might sound, since the interweb world doesn't really like the name of the evil dictator at the time or his Yahtzee followers. In his 2001 book, The Hunt for Zero Point, author Nick Cook identified claims about Die Glocke as having originated in the 2000 Polish book, The Truth About the Wonder Weapon by Igor Witkowski. Nick describes Igor's claims of a device called the Bell, engineered by Yahtzee scientists, that was a glowing, rotating contraption rumored to have some kind of anti-gravitational effect and be a time machine. I know I've already mentioned Doctor Who today, but when it's right, it's right. According to Nick, Die Glocke was a bell-shaped, about 12 feet high and 9 feet in diameter, and incorporated 2 high-speed, counter-rotating cylinders filled with a purplish, liquid, metallic-looking substance that was supposed to be highly radioactive, with the codename Xerum 525. He recounts claims that scientists and technicians who worked on the bell, and who did not, die of its effects, or disappear mysteriously, were wiped out by the SS at the close of the war, and the device was moved to an unknown location. Nick proposed that SS official Hans Kemmler later secretly traded this technology to the US military in exchange for his freedom. Historical theorists are pretty sure that a concrete ring called the Henge near the Wenceslaus mine that was built in 1943 and vaguely resembled Stonehenge was used as a launch pad for the Bell. Igor's book was translated to English in 2003, and he claimed to have discovered evidence of Die Glocke in a review of World War II era documents that were declassified by the Polish government, which led him to additional research via the archives and interviews. The first document, allegedly supplied to Igor by an unnamed Polish government official, was an affidavit from the war crimes trial for General Jacob Sporenberg, who supposedly confessed to ordering the deaths of around 60 people who had knowledge of the secretive project. Kurt de Bus, Werner von Braun, and Walter Gerlach were also allegedly implicated in the Die Glocke research. Igor claims Die Glocke was organized under a division of the Waffen-SS and operated mainly at facilities in Lower Silesia. Die Glocke was conceived in early 1942, and active experimentation began around mid-1944. Prisoners from the Gross Rosen concentration camp were exposed to radiation from Die Glocke, resulting in many deaths and health problems. Survivors of the camp reported witnessing tests of the Die Glocke, reporting a bright bluish light from the object. Igor believes Xerum 525 was likely an irradiated form of mercury, used in the creation of a form of plasma that was intended as a weapon or propulsion system, and which would have been capable of distorting space and time. So what you're telling me is that there is indeed a time-traveling device out there? I just need to find it? Game on. In second place, we have a very confused driver. Back in 1969, Elsie and his business associate, Bob, are driving along Highway 167 towards the oil center city of Lafayette after finishing lunch in the southwest Louisiana town of Abbeville, United States. It was the 20th of October and around 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon when they spotted an old turtleback car going really slow. They were, intrigued by the vehicle because it wasn't something either of them had seen before. I had to look it up myself because I am honestly the most vehicle unaware person to exist. Honest to goodness, I exasperated the heck out of my dad growing up and to this day. He can go on and on and on about car makes, models, all the specifics, and I just sit there with no thoughts in my brain. For what it's worth, the vehicle in question would be very unique to the eye and definitely an antique. But here's the thing, even though the vehicle looked like a blast from the past, it was in mint condition. The duo overtook the vehicle, but not before slowing down right next to it to check it out, in detail, just for curiosity's sake. Clearly printed on it, which was quite odd because antique cars weren't allowed to be driven on the road at that time unless they were being used for a ceremonial parade. Things just got weirder from there. The person driving the car was a young woman dressed in a 1940s dress, complete with a hat and fur coat, and she was accompanied by a small boy who also was dressed in a heavy coat and a cap. As the men pulled up next to the car, the lady started panicking, frantically looking back and forth as if she was in the middle of somewhere completely unknown. So Elsie asked her if she needed any help, to which she responded yes. But at no point did she roll down the window or even look him in the eye. After asking her several times to halt the vehicle so they could help, the guys finally saw her pull over on the side of the road. Elsie and Bob passed her and pulled over in front of her, but as soon as they looked behind them, the woman's vehicle was gone, as if it had completely vanished into thin air. So this was a highway without any traffic, so no disappearing of this could be possible in any way. Completely shocked and not knowing how to describe what had just happened, Elsie and Bob decided to keep on driving on. A little while later, while they were still on Highway 167, they saw another new car pass a very old car at a really slow speed. It was apparently so slow that it looked like the cars had come to a halt. And as soon as the new car pulled over in front of the old car, the same thing happened. It stopped and then completely disappeared. They couldn't believe their eyes. And neither would I. Even the guy in the other car was completely shocked. The three started describing what each had seen while walking around the area in hopes of finding some sort of evidence. The third guy insisted they should be reporting this to the police, as this, according to him, was a missing person case. Elsie and Bob refused, more so because they had no idea where the woman and the boy, along with the car, had vanished. They never saw the vehicle again, so I hope that lady and her ward found their way home. In first place, we have the Wall Street time traveler. On the 28th of January in 2003, a 44-year-old man named Andrew Carlson was arrested and detained by the police for insider trading on Wall Street. Over a 2-week period in the stock market, Andrew went from having $800 to making, okay guess, go on, $350 million. Whatever he invested turned into gold. So I asked my dad about his odds, and he confirmed that it's nearly impossible to make the kind of profits he did without, insider knowledge. He was arrested by the cops on the allegation that he must have had, illegal insider information. But when asked why and how he did this, during a 4-hour-long confession, Andrew claimed to be a man from the year 2256. Since he was from the future, he claimed he knew exactly how the 126 stocks he invested in were going to perform. Now, obviously, the cops thought this guy was chatting just rubbish. But soon after he was released on bail, the man disappeared from the face of Earth, and even after repeated attempts, he was not found. Was he telling the truth? Who knows, but wait for it, I'm gonna blow your mind. Andrew predicted the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. I don't know. I do not know. And now that I'm once again pleading for someone to please share their time traveling secrets with me, we've sadly reached the end of our time for today. Pretty please. I promise I won't tell.
Number 5. With the James Webb Telescope, NASA has found a way to be able to peer back into time, literally, and look deeper into the cosmos than ever before. The speed of light is 300,000 kilometers a second, meaning that it takes about 8 minutes for light from the sun to hit Earth, meaning the rays of the sun are not real time, but rather already 8 minutes old when you see it. So using that same thinking, most stars are light years and light years away. And for those at home, a light year is 9.46 trillion kilometers. So really, hop, skip, and a jump away. The James Webb Telescope is able to see so deeply into space that it's able to see light emitted from stars 13.5 billion years ago, after the dawn of the Big Bang. So in a sense, we can travel through time and are able to see light from the advent of the universe. It's not quite the TARDIS hurtling through the galaxy, but it is an unimaginable achievement, and one that will be surpassed sooner than we think. If you're liking what we're doing here at Top 5 Scary, why not toss a little subscribe our way? And I promise the rest of the ones on this list will be time travel. I just wanted to slip one little educational thing in there for you. Number 4. The chronovisor. One of the most secretive places in the world is undoubtedly the Vatican's archives. It's been said that it's one of the most secure buildings on the planet, so if you're planning an Ocean's 11 kind of deal, think again. We can only speculate what sort of things they have locked away in there, but it has been said that they have technologies we could not believe in there. Like, you know, the chronovisor. According to French priest and paranormal investigator Francois Brun, the chronovisor was a device that allowed members of the Vatican to see into the past. Brun claims that the chronovisor was first built in the 50s by a scientist and priest, Father Pellegrino Maria Ernetti, along with a council of scientists working in secret around the clock. Brun's description of the seemingly magic device was that it was a large cabinet made of unknown metals connected with a series of levers and buttons. Apparently, it could be programmed to see any date in the past. From Brun's accounts, Ernetti used it to see all sorts of wondrous things, from a speech given by Napoleon Bonaparte, watching the crucifixion, and recovering fragments of a lost ancient tragedy play called Thyestes to transcribe to the modern day. Now, obviously, there's gonna be some skepticism as to whether or not the chronovisor exists or ever existed at all. I mean, it's a pretty bold claim. A photo that Ernetti claimed was a real-life photo of the crucifixion later turned out to be nothing more than just an edited wood carving. Unfortunately, we may never know the truth behind the chronovisor since the doors to the Vatican's vault are locked very, very, very tightly.
Coming in now at number 3, we have the Palace of Versailles. Back in 1901, 2 professors from St. Hugh's College in Oxford, England, travelled to the world-famous Palace of Versailles. Now to me, this kind of sounds like part of the plot of Outlander Season 2. Where's Jamie? If you didn't know, the Palace of Versailles was the royal home of the French monarchy until their untimely demise in 1792. Let them eat cake and all of that. Well, Marie Antoinette, one of the last royals to live there, was abruptly executed in 1793. So it was incredibly bizarre then when in 1901, our 2 professors, Anne Moberly and Moberly-Jourdain, were having a stroll through the grounds of the palace, enjoying the sights, the sounds, and just so happened to stumble upon Marie Antoinette in the very flesh, just chilling outside her private retreat. There she was in all of her regal glory, head still on, sitting on a stool and sketching a painting. She shortly disappeared after a group of tourists approached the area, but the 2 professors were so astonished that they wrote a book on the matter. Now it gained notoriety by how grounded it seemed, considering the 2 professors were highly educated and well-respected women. Maybe they slipped through a time stream. Who knows? There may also be another explanation. On Most Amazing Top 10, I did the Parisian urban legends, and in it, the Palace of Versailles came up. Guess who's said to haunt it? Yup, that's right, Mrs. Let Them Eat Cake herself. What do you think, Jack? Time traveler or ghost?
Time traveler?
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think that's cool, like Marie Antoinette could just pop up in
She'd
any
have been
time.
headless house.
Yeah, that's true, very true.
If we apply, ghost
logic.
Ghost logic. Swinging right in at number 2, we have the man from Taured. This story is pretty damn crazy, so bear with me as I collect myself. In 1954, a man was trying to get through customs at Haneda Airport in Tokyo when he stumbled upon a bit of a trouble with customs. It wasn't the usual incident. He hadn't accidentally packed a steak knife into his carry-on or failed to declare the bag of potatoes in his suitcase. It was because he claimed to be from a country that, well, it just didn't exist. Strangely enough though, he even had a passport with stamps in it to prove that he actually did. This passport was from a country called Taured, and it completely perplexed the Japanese custom agents. He claimed that it was between Spain and France, and when officials pulled out a map and pointed to Andorra, the man became very angry. Yes, he said that location was correct, but he was from Taured, a country which had existed for at least 1,000 years. He'd never even heard of Andorra. The man was given a hotel room for the evening, probably while customs figured out what the hell was going on, but even though there were armed guards stationed outside his room, the man just up and vanished the very next morning. His passport, which was stored in a secure security office, was also gone. The mystery remains completely unsolved to this very day.
Jack saved the number 1 spot for me. What could it be? We have the mystery of John Titor. In November of the far gone year of 2000, the time travel section of the internet became a hive of activity after a series of posts from a man named John Titor. Although they'd been posted to the usual conspiracy theorist hotspots, his claim managed to pick up traction because of his intriguing content. John Titor Titor claimed to be a soldier based in Tampa, Florida from the year 2036. By his own account, the government had sent him back in time to 1975 to retrieve a particular IBM computer which they needed in order to debug some pesky computer programs. Yada yada yada. Sounds asinine enough, right? Well, John Titor claimed that he'd hopped off his time machine in the year 2000 for personal reasons, and since he was already there, he might as well warn everyone how crappy the future was gonna get. Thanks, John. John claimed that civil unrest would begin in the US in 2004, and by 2008 there would be a full-blown civil war. 2015 would see the US splitting into 5 different regions, and World War III would have come and gone by now. Well, as we know, none of these things have happened, so complete madman, or was his timing just off? People are still so convinced by John Titor's account and its incredible level of believability. He spoke in thorough detail about the mechanics and science of his time-traveling machine, and it almost seemed impossible that he isn't, maybe somewhere is telling the truth. All of his posts have been deleted, and most records of him have been expunged from the internet. Fishy.
Number 5. UFO footage. When we talk about unidentified flying objects, we tend to think about aliens from distant planets showing up in flying saucers to abduct and probe unsuspecting humans. But what if these visitors from another planet are not interstellar travelers, but simply our descendants using advanced technology from the future to visit the past, which is of course our present? Such is the theory put forward by Dr. Michael P. Masters in his book Identified Flying Objects, a multidisciplinary scientific approach to the UFO phenomenon. Masters believes that these travelers are using their craft to not only experience, but study the past, and that people who are abducted by aliens are actually being studied by anthropologists. As he himself puts it, the alleged abduction accounts are mostly scientific in nature. It's probably future anthropologists, historians, linguists that are coming back to get information in a way that we currently can't without access to that technology. That said, I do think that some component of it is also tourism. Undoubtedly, in the future there are those that will pay a lot of money to have the opportunity to go back and observe their favorite period in history. Some of the most popular tourist sites are the pyramids of Giza and Machu Picchu in Peru, and old prehistoric sites. There's certainly still missing pieces of the puzzle, he said. There are aspects of time that we don't yet understand. Wanted is a theory of quantum gravity, and we can meld general relativity and quantum mechanics. I'm just trying to put forth the best model I can based on the current scientific knowledge. Hopefully, over time, we can continue to build on this. Of course, one could argue that the idea of UFOs being time travelers is a more complicated and less likely theory than aliens, but Masters believes the opposite is true, saying, "We know we're here. We know humans exist. We know that, and we've had a long evolutionary history on this planet, and we know our technology is going to be more advanced in the future. I think the simplest explanation innately is that it is us. I'm just trying to offer what is likely the most parsimonious explanation." If Masters is correct in his theory, and extraterrestrials are really extratempestrials, as he has dubbed them, then all the footage of unidentified flying objects that has been discovered, including both the amateur tapes and the ones that were released to the public officially by the Pentagon a few years ago, are actually footage of time travel in action. This could explain how so many UFOs appear to be moving at speeds that are impossible for current craft to achieve, and how they seem to appear and disappear in what seems like an instant. Number 4. The James Webb Telescope. Our next entry is a bit more literal and less grand than the others on this list, but it is still worth mentioning. The James Webb Telescope may not be able to transport us back in time, but what it can do is let us look into the distant past, perhaps to show us where we came from as a species at the moment of creation. The James Webb Space Telescope was first launched in late December 2021. It was a collaborative project between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. It uses infrared astronomy to view things in the vast cosmos of space that would be impossible for even the Hubble Space Telescope to see, with its first release image being touted as the deepest photo of the universe ever taken. But what does this have to do with time travel? Well, as NASA scientists explained it, telescopes can be time machines. Looking out in space is like looking back in time. It sounds magical, but it's actually very simple. Light needs time to travel across the vast distances of space to reach us. So, light moves at a speed of about 1 billion kilometers per hour. So the time it takes the light from a light bulb to reach your eyes is pretty much imperceptible. But light that is reaching you from millions or billions of kilometers away, such as the light of a star, can be centuries, millennia, or even eons old by the time we see it. So the James Webb Telescope isn't just the telescope that can view the furthest into the universe. It is also the telescope that can see the furthest back in time, showing images of galaxies of stars as they appeared 13.5 billion years ago. Scientists hope that they will be able to use the telescope to look even further back in time in order to see the first few 100 million years of the universe after the Big Bang, so that we can observe the forces that resulted in the birth of our little blue planet in action.
Number 3. Gateway experience. The CIA was fascinated with harnessing psychic ability. This is very well documented, with several projects being released to the public about this sort of thing. To simplify it as much as I possibly can, the project was centered around using a combination of hypnosis and finely tuned audio to create an altered state of consciousness. The thinking was that through binaural beats, the output of the left and right hemispheres of the brain would sync up and make you more psychic good, I guess. The summation from one of the researchers is that a human brain operating normally is kind of like a lamp. But when both hemispheres are in sync, this light turns into a laser, reaching farther and more effective than before. The goal was to expand the human consciousness and have it reach outside the body, being able to astrally project yourself back in time. Test subjects would meditate in a mantra saying, "I am just a physical body, and I deeply desire to expand my consciousness." While listening to this hypnotic audio, putting their body into a sleep state, the subjects were told to visualize time as a wheel with spokes that point to events in their past, and just find a way to transport their consciousness back to those moments. In the early tests, less than 5% of the subjects were able to achieve this, but the team believed that with years of practice they'd be able to harness this ability better. The final stage of the learning and experience was an out-of-body movement, where the subject would be able to lift their consciousness out of the body entirely and harmoniously interact with the environment. However, unfortunately, no one in the project was able to reach this stage just yet. Number 2. In 2019, Reddit user Taured posted a story captioned, "Time travel is not what you think it's like." In the post, the user named Clark details the experience he had in college at Georgia State University when he was approached by someone scouting for a clinical trial dubbed Project BTAOW33. A little disappointing that it doesn't have a super cool name like Project Majestic or Project ZK47 or something, but okay. Going along, the researchers promised to pay for Clark's tuition in exchange for participating in a clinical trial. Clark met with the researchers and was taken to a small nondescript house in the Georgian mountain woods, wherein laid a silver metal house with a ring surrounding it, which the crew insisted the test subjects avoid coming into any contact with. Clark continues and says that there were only 2 other people participating in the trial with him, 2 other students of a similar age, a young man and a young woman. The 3 of them were ushered into the home and introduced to the experiment. The doctors told them they would be launching 3 hours into the future, and the entire house would be transported, and in 3 hours they would reapparate. The doctors reassured them that it would be completely safe, as they practiced on rats and dogs, although they didn't know what it would feel like. After a brief explanation, the doctors drove off to their control site to begin the experiment. And here's where it gets weird. Clark claims that outside became dark instantly. Not just dark, like black, like the abyss, like an unmoving void. In the post, he describes it as like being between dreams. He claims from here that the 3 test subjects began to panic, shaking around the room, desperately trying to see something outside or escape this house that they'd been locked in. Clark claims that he has no idea how long he was stuck inside that building, saying it could have been anywhere from minutes to hours to even days. One of the subjects attempted to escape, and he said he was lost to the void entirely. So what happened? Well, Clark claims that after an extended period of stasis in this void, they did appear 3 hours later in time, just like they had claimed, and that after being returned home, he'd never heard from the researchers or the project again. Number 1. The Philadelphia experiment was a US military experiment performed sometime around October 1943. The USS Eldridge was the center of these top secret Black Ops level tests. Officially, the project was to prototype advanced cloaking technology, with the intention being able to render an entire warship invisible. Think like what the Predator does, but for a battleship. Well, that would already be unnerving enough. Legend has it that the story runs deeper than that, and that the cloaking, ironically, actually, was a cover for the true reason behind the trial, which was experimenting with time travel. Witnesses of the experiment claim that they saw the USS Eldridge disappear into a cloud of green smoke surrounding the ship, where it then vanished, before reappearing after a few seconds. Reports from the crew are horrifying to say the least, where they claim that they were affected in various disturbing ways. Crew complaining of intense headaches, nausea, some claiming they suffered mental issues after the trial, others developed mysterious illness. Scariest of all though is the claims that some crew members had fused to the ship itself, skin and limbs fused to the bulkhead. One crew member in particular, Al Bielek, claims to have first-hand experience with the Eldritch, where he insists the experiment was a success, and when the Eldritch vanished, it reappeared in the year 2137. Bielek made a litany of claims about his visions of the future, claiming he saw a utopian vision of the future where the world was run on an AI that had eliminated all of the world's problems and conflicts. Officially, the US government has outright denied everything regarding the Philadelphia experiment and has ignored all of Bielek's claims altogether. But of course they would, okay? They're not gonna throw their hands up, lay their cards on the table, and be like, oh yeah, we've got time travel, we've been traveling time since the 40s, we've been experimenting with it ever since, you caught us. No, they're gonna keep it under wraps until they're ready, and they'll probably reveal it about 40 years ago.
Number 5. The time-traveling hipster. The town of Gold Bridge, British Columbia was founded in 1932 with the idea of housing the people involved in the nearby gold mine in the neighboring town of Browlorne. Gold Bridge is a very small town, and therefore there was not a lot to do, resulting in anything that happened being an event. Such was the case in 1941, when the South Fork Bridge was reopened. The image in question shows a crowd of locals attending the reopening, wearing clothing typical of the time, with the men wearing suits and ties, as well as fedoras, and the women wearing smart, simple dresses and coats to keep them warm. However, there is one figure in the photo who stands out and feels a bit out of place. Near the front of the crowd is a man in sunglasses who appears to be wearing a t-shirt and sweater rather than the era-appropriate attire. This image has made the rounds online, with many claiming that it is a photo of a time traveler caught on film. But are there other possibilities? Of course. The style of the sunglasses the man is wearing first appeared in the 1920s, and the t-shirt he is wearing could actually be an ice hockey jersey with a sewn-on emblem. Beyond that, there's of course the logical questions that come with assuming he is a time traveler. If you were to travel through time, something that the lack of document incidents would suggest is kept as secret as possible if it is real, why would you be wandering around in futuristic clothes that would draw attention to you? Furthermore, if you could travel anywhere in time to witness historical events, why would you choose to travel to Gold Bridge, British Columbia to watch a bridge be reopened? The man is likely not a time traveler. The situation is kind of amusing. Imagine going out to a public event and realizing that you are so underdressed that people assume you are from the future. Number 4. TikTok time traveler. Every once in a while scrolling through your For You page on TikTok, you will see people making some pretty bold claims, whether they be that they can cast spells for you, read your mind, or even tell your future. But something that you may not be expecting is people claiming to be from the future. Such is the case with a user calling himself the Lone Survivor. The user claims that they are from the year 2027 and that the videos he is posting are from the future. What makes the videos so disturbing is the fact that he also claims that he is the only survivor left on Earth, and that there is no one else left on the planet except him. He posts videos showing completely empty streets. In all his posts, no one can be seen walking by in the background. No cars can be seen on the roads. It is as if everyone simply disappeared. Of course, this isn't enough to prove to people that what he claims is true, so people commonly challenge him to post a video of himself visiting notoriously crowded spaces like hospitals and theme parks. Despite the fact that it should be impossible, he always manages to get the footage, with areas that should be filled with people no matter what time of day, not only being empty, but appearing as if no one has been there for years. When challenged to enter secure locations like a military base, he still managed to get the footage of himself on a base completely devoid of personnel. Of course, some people point out that many of the places he visits seem a little too maintained, with grass and plant life still appearing freshly mowed, and his refusal to show his face not making sense, as there's no reason to hide it if he is truly the last man on Earth. Whether he is truly a time traveler or just an extremely creative content maker filmmaker. The fact that he is able to get the footage is impressive, even if it is hard to qualify it as definitive proof of anything. Number 3. Time travel at Area 51. Next up, we have a Reddit post from an anonymous user who claims to be a former employee of the infamous Area 51, who stumbled upon footage that proves the existence of time travel. This post should of course be taken with a massive grain of salt, but the mechanics of time travel it talks about are worth discussing, so I have included it on this list. As the user themselves put it, I worked for years at Area 51, being brought in on Janet Airlines and getting paid through companies I had never worked for, just like many other employees have. In my time there, my main job was sorting and archiving the footage and notes of various projects that they were researching or working on. I would see notes and tapes of the various experimental aircraft we were developing, hours of grainy UFO footage, and anything else you can imagine from such a secretive branch of the government. However, one of the strangest things to cross my desk was not about aliens, but about the government's attempts to harness the power of time travel. The transcripts, and presumably the accompanying recordings they were based off of, were labeled as Project Throwback, and they talked about how in the late 90s, the government had created a machine based off of alien technology recovered from various UFO crashes over the years that they believed might be able to send people back in time. They had created the machine and wanted to begin testing it, thinking that the ability to change history in a way that aligned with American interests could be an amazing win for our country. The disasters and attacks that could be prevented alone made it worth the time and money that would be required to create such a tool. After years of working on it, it was finally time to test it. The goal of the test was to send a man back in time a day in the past as proof of concept. In order to avoid any potential paradoxes that they didn't know the potential consequences of, they had a site designated for the test pilot from the future to go to and return from without crossing paths with his past self or the scientists who were working on the project, so that they wouldn't know the results of the experiment outside of its proper chronology. The machine seemed to work at first, disappearing with the pilot as expected. However, the craft never returned, and no evidence of him in the designated site was found. The scientists involved theorized in their reports that the pilot may have been killed in his time travel attempt, or may have created a branch reality where the experiment was a success. But there is no way to know where he went for sure, or if we can ever bring him back. Now, obviously the veracity of this Reddit post is dubious at best, but the idea of time travel creating alternate timelines where the changes take hold as opposed to the more commonly used in pop culture version of time travel, where one timeline is being changed and affected, is interesting. Does this story of an Area 51 employee coming across a tape proving that the government is experimenting with temporal travel have any element of truth to it? And if it does, what happened to the pilot of the machine? Where and when did he end up? There is no way to know for sure. Number 2. Time-traveling priests of the Vatican. The Vatican City is a sacerdotal monarchical state that is ruled by the Pope, making it a city-state. The Vatican is extremely secretive and is the source of thousands of conspiracy theories that range from highly improbable to basically confirmed. Somewhere on that spectrum, you will find the tale of the Vatican's device for looking through time that is known simply as the chronovisor. The theory came to light in 1972 when an Italian newspaper published a story claiming that a monk/scientist by the name of Marcello Pellegrino Ernetti had led a team of scientists including Erno Fermi and Werner von Braun to use the principle that energy is neither created nor destroyed, it only transforms, in order to create a machine that would allow them to see and hear through time in order to witness sounds and images of important historical events. Some media claims that Ernetti was able to use this machine to capture footage of Jesus on his way to his crucifixion, to view and transcribe lost ancient Greek plays, and witness speeches made by historical figures such as Napoleon. Apparently the machine was deemed to be too dangerous by the Vatican and was either hidden away or destroyed. Lending some credence to this story is a decree from the Vatican in 1988 that threatened excommunication for any person using a device that matched the description of the chronovisor. Is the chronovisor real? And if so, does it still exist, hidden somewhere in the Vatican archives? And what happened to Ernetti's footage and images of historical events which would prove the veracity of this scientific marvel? If the device could only be used to see through time and not interact with it, What were Vatican officials so afraid people would see that they hid away the device? Number 1. A time traveler's LAPD interview. In 1984, a bizarre series of attacks began to take place, with several women with the same name being targeted and attacked. Police got wise to the pattern and were able to find one of the women before she was killed. They were also able to take a man into custody who was telling a bizarre story that he claimed explained everything. The man was believed to be homeless and insane, but he was interviewed by a criminal psychologist who took down his statement. The entire interview was of course filmed by the police, but very little of it, if any, was believed. The man claimed that he had traveled back in time from the year 2027, where he had been a soldier in a war against a rogue SAC-NORAD program that had become self-aware and attacked humanity in a nuclear attack. He claimed that they had won the war, but that the computers had sent a robot back in time to try and change the outcome, but that he had followed to prevent this. These claims were of course written off as a paranoid delusion, but soon after, the precinct was attacked by a large man who seemed intent on ending the lives of everyone in the building. Security footage of the attack shows the attacker shrugging off bullets and effortlessly wiping out the precinct. The supposed time traveler and the woman managed to escape. The woman was eventually institutionalized after having a mental breakdown, presumably caused by the incident, but neither the supposed time traveler or the attacker were ever seen again. Were they really from a dystopian future? Where did the attacker go? And most importantly, will he be back? We may never know for sure.
So in the early 2000s, online posts from an alleged time traveler took the interwebs by storm. The first post using John Titor's military symbol appeared on the Time Travel Institute forums on November 2nd of 2000. Them being specific, under the username timetravel_0. The post discussed time travel in general, the first one being the 6 parts description of the components required for a working time machine and responses to questions from other posters about how such a machine might work. This anonymous user described his time machine as a stationary mass. Temporal displacement unit powered by 2 top-spin dual positive singularities, and producing a standard offset Tipler sinusoid. The earliest post was more explicit, detailing the components of the machine, so 2 magnetic housing units for the dual microsingularities, an electron injection manifold to alter mass and gravity of the microsingularities, a cooling and X-ray venting system, gravity sensors or a variable gravity lock, 4 main celsium clocks, 3 main computer units, and a partridge in a pear tree? According to the post, the device was installed in the rear of a 1966 Chevrolet Corvette convertible. Try saying that 5 times fast. Hey, I drive a Chevy, I can't judge. A second thread was also made due to the shortcomings of the forum software used at the time. The name John Titor was first introduced in January of 2001 though, when time travel began posting at the Art Bell Post to Post BBS forums, which required a name or a pseudonym for every account. The final post was made in March of 01 though. In his online postings, John claimed to be an American soldier from the year 2036, based in Tampa, Florida. He said that he was assigned to a governmental time travel project, and that as part of the project he was sent back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer, which was needed to debug various legacy computer programs that existed in 2036, a possible reference to the Unix year 2038 problem. Now it's 2024 when I'm saying this, and I don't think we're any closer to space-time travel. John had said that he'd been selected for this mission because his paternal grandfather was directly involved in the original assembly and programming of the 5100. He attempted to provide proof of this by describing unpublicized features of said computer. He said that he was on a stopover in the year 2000 for personal reasons, to collect pictures lost in the future, and to visit his family, of whom he spoke often. He also said that for several months he'd been trying to warn anybody who would listen about the potential threat of a disease that could spread through beef products, and about the possibility of an upcoming civil war within the United States. When questioned about UFOs and extraterrestrial life, however, our loose-lipped traveler claimed to not know much on the subject. Okay, time for my theory, because I think you've been patient enough. I think John was an alien, and from another timeline, but he's posting just enough information to see where we as a society were in terms of advancements. Going back to what I said earlier about how it's 2024 right now, and that would be 12 years away, I don't think we're 12 years away from time travel. So what if our time and alien time move at a different pace? So like 1 alien year is 100 human years, and they've made more advancements over there obviously, so he just got a little confused with the conversion. Well, think about it, would ya? Alright, this next one is a really strange story which remains unanswered by science, ergo contributing to my alien theory. Alright, the story goes like this. On a hot afternoon in July of 1954, a man arrived at the Haneda Airport, also known as the Tokyo International Airport. Described to be a Caucasian man with a beard, this man is assumed to have been French, but he was pretty fluent in other languages as well, including Japanese. Now, there's a couple of versions here. Some say that the man handed over his passport to be stamped by the Japanese immigration officials when the officers realized that while the passport seemed perfectly normal, the country where it was issued Taured, didn't exist in real life. In another version, the man mentioned that he was from Taured, and when the officers didn't believe him, he showed his passport. Nevertheless, the man tried his best to convince the officers that this place does in fact exist in real life. He claimed it was located in between France and Spain, and also that his hometown wasn't, new either. It had been around for 1,000 years. Eventually, when the man was shown a world map, he pointed to the area which is currently the Principality of Andorra. He was genuinely confused as to why authorities were hellbent on calling this place its, proper name. Eventually, the immigration officers arrested the man on suspicions of being a criminal. To interrogate him further and figure out what in God's name was going on, he was shifted to a hotel nearby. 2 guards were positioned outside his room to make sure he didn't escape, but anybody want to guess what happened when they went to check on him the next day? Gone. No signs of his escape, no nothing. Even the documents he was carrying with him, which could have been used as evidence of his existence, were also gone. So, was he from the future? Or more interestingly, could he be living in a parallel universe where Andorra is known as Taured? Or, more likely, he was from another galaxy, with a map and documents that were incorrectly translated from English to a language he was fluent in, and when he realized his mistake, he got beamed back to his ship or mother planet. It makes sense!
Number 3. The disappearing bike. Next, we have this footage from a security camera. At first, the footage looks rather typical, with a man unloading a white van in a parking lot, while a man on a bike drives into the lot from behind and past him. Suddenly, the man vanishes without a trace. One moment he is there, and the next he is simply faded away. This video has attracted some attention, with some people claiming that it shows proof of teleporters, others presuming that the reason the biker disappears is that he is a time traveler, and this was simply the moment where he was transported to either the past or the future. If this is true, was the man wearing some time travel device that was able to transport him and his bike? Or is it some sort of innate superpower for him? Or perhaps it's the bike that powers time travel with the use of quantum manipulation. If the man is traveling through time, what purpose does it serve? Is he going back to change the past? Or is he returning to the future after having observed some seemingly tiny but incredibly important moment in history, which will cause ripples through time that will one day determine the fate of the human race? Or is this actually a very basic special effect that people on the internet have blown way out of proportion? We may never know. Number 2. Movie extras from the future. If you could go back in time, what are some of the minor, non-earth-shattering things you would do? Personally, there are concerts or films from before my time that I would want to experience with a crowd that is seeing them for the very first time, sitting down in their seats, unaware that they are about to witness an iconic piece of history unfold before their very eyes. Or perhaps it might be fun to take it one step further and be a part of an iconic piece of art. One of the definitive filmmakers of early movies was of course Charlie Chaplin, known for his comedic silent films where his character, the tramp, would be put in bold and hilarious situations. His influence on film history is incalculable, so if one was to travel in time to watch a classic filmmaker at work, then Chaplin would be a great choice. Chaplin's 1928 film The Circus, which he wrote, produced, directed, and starred in, follows the tramp running away from the police and into a circus act where he inadvertently becomes a star performer. It and The Gold Rush are considered to be Chaplin's best films, so it makes sense that if a fan from the future were to pick a Chaplin movie to make a cameo in, it would be this one. During a moment in the film, one of the extras walking by in the background can be seen holding something up to her ear and talking into it. The film quality isn't great, but many insisted that the woman was talking with someone on a cell phone. The story was widely circulated, even appearing in TV news reports all over the world. Who is she on the phone with? Who is she talking to? And what is she saying? Is she bragging about the fact that she has managed to permanently ingrain herself in film history? The irony is that for many modern audiences, this is the only scene from the movie they have seen, keeping an eye out for this supposed time traveler. So, whether it is true or not, for many people, the woman walking by in the background is the most iconic part of the film. Of course, some people believe that she is actually holding up and using an ear trumpet, while others believe that she is using one of the very first portable hearing aids that were beginning to be rolled out around this time. Whatever the case, the exact nature of this woman and what she is doing remains a mystery. Number 1. Similar faces throughout history. One of the most common examples of supposed evidence given as proof of time travel is old photos of people that happen to look a lot like celebrities from our time period. One of the more recent widely passed around images, for example, is this image of a young woman working in a gold gold mine in 1898, who looks remarkably like the modern-day climate activist Greta Thunberg. While it can be interesting to see these doppelgangers from across time, it really isn't proof of anything, other than the fact that there's really only so many combinations of facial features available before you start seeing repeats. However, there is one image that I want to draw your attention to, because it is just too weird. If you look at this photo from the year 1885, you will see two men standing in front of an under construction clock tower. The photo was taken at a fundraising event for the construction of the tower, and at first glance, there's really nothing notable about it. However, things start to get complicated once you see this newspaper from nearly 100 years later. The man featured on the front page is almost identical to the man in the clock photo. The newspaper is even from the same town that the clock tower was being built in all those years earlier, making it an important part of the town's history that a local time traveler might have interest in. But what really clinches it is the fact that, as the headline points out, the man is a local inventor. Did this man crack the mystery of time travel? Or is this just another case where similar looking men appear throughout history and cause us to wildly speculate? We may never know.
Number 5. Victor Goddard. Royal Air Force Commander Victor Goddard was a flying ace who served with the RAF in the First and Second World Wars, who seemed to be a vessel for paranormal activity. In 1935, during action in the Second World War, Sir Goddard was sent to investigate the condition of an abandoned Scottish airfield in the unnotable village of Drem, east of Edinburgh. When Goddard flew over the field, he reported it, as they'd expected, that it was as they described, a desolate, abandoned airfield where the cows were grazing on grass that had forced itself through. As he circled the airfield, however, he found himself caught in a storm cloud that had been passing overhead, and had to fight to regain control. When exiting the cloud, Goddard found himself frozen in fear, looking down and reporting that the airfield had been completely repaired. The airbase had been restored, now fueling and stocking 4 biplanes in its hangar. The abandoned field was now crewed by a staff of mechanics, all dressed in blue coveralls, unlike the RAF at the time, which would have worn brown uniforms. The planes on the field too had been painted a bright yellow, contrasting with the usual drab silver of the RAF at the time. The storm cloud passed through again, and Goddard reported it vanished yet again. Had he passed through a temporal loop? Was there something more in that storm? Most concerningly and most interestingly, in 1939 the airfield at Drem was restored completely to working order, and shockingly, the RAF mechanic uniforms were updated to be blue coveralls and the planes started to be painted yellow, as if for a moment Goddard had seen years into the future. The incident haunted Goddard, and he wrote about his experiences in his book Flight Towards Reality, where he tried to make some sense of his brief flight through time. Number 4. Mike Markham. In 1995, Mike Markham was a 21-year-old student majoring in electricity with a knack for homemade gadgets. His goal? To create a time machine out of scraps in his home in Missouri. The device, which he had dubbed Jacob's Ladder, referring to the biblical ladder to the heaven, and less likely the fantastic 90s horror film, was constructed using the laser from a compact disc player and a continuous arc between 2 poles. And you know what, if I'm being honest, I'm more of a Morty than I am a Rick. I got no idea how he built this and I got no idea what it does, but he says it would help him travel through time. Markham claimed that his device produced such energy that when he threw a piece of sheet metal into it, it disappeared and reappeared seconds later. Hoping to see what he could do with some real power, Markham stole 6 transformers from a power grid nearby. His next experiment caused a blackout in the neighborhood, and his theft alerted the local police. Markham spent the next few months in jail, but upon his release was stunned to discover that he'd become a bit of a local hero. After an interview on a radio station, calls were pouring in from people who wanted to donate money, supplies, and their own ideas on how to help Markham with his time travel device. For the next 2 years, Markham would work tirelessly on his machine, having rebuilt the plans to be the size of a man. 1997 would be the last update from Mike Markham, who vanished from the public eye and the world at large, with his whereabouts being unknown since then. After missing a call from his parole officer, police tried to track Markham down, going to the warehouse he used as a workshop, finding nothing but burned up machines, damaged electronics, and no sign of life at all. Did Markham's machine work? Well, we may never know unless he decides to come back. Or forward.
Okay, so I'm guessing we've all heard about the time-traveling hipster, right? No, I'm not talking about the 11th Doctor, even though I'm more partial to the 9th, but I digress. So in 2004, a black and white photo in the Their Past Lives Here exhibit at the Braylor Pioneer Museum in British Columbia kinda took the interwebs by storm. And this photo was on display but it didn't really take the internet by storm until 2010. That was when the collection was digitized. So the photo in question showed a crowd of spectators at an event, and on the back was a note stating that it was taken in 1941 at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia. Nobody knows who took the photo though, and the identity of anybody in the crowd is also online. When the collection made its way to the interwebs though, several people picked up on something that looked a little out of place. You know, when you're like staring at something, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So a lot of popular websites got wind of the mystery and they started republishing the picture. So what was so special about it? Well, there's this one guy in the crowd who looks completely out of place. Kinda like how I would look in a church right now, just like this, or at one of my jobs where I wear a uniform or a sparkly outfit. This just doesn't make sense. The man's appearance is way too modern to fit with the 1940s setting. He's wearing a modern t-shirt, modern sunglasses, and he's holding a camera that's way too small to have existed in 1941. His appearance among men and women dressed much more formally and in keeping with the era has led him to be dubbed the time-traveling hipster. So a lot of folks think that he was an imposter sent from the future to take photos of the South Fork Bridge for unknown purposes. I know y'all are going there with your brains, but hey Alexa, what if it was photoshopped for attention? Okay, I'm gonna leave that stone unturned. The first piece of evidence to support its authenticity is from a second photo, which is a photo of the same event but from a different angle, and this was discovered shortly after the first one went viral. It's part of a different collection and is captioned "Opening of the New Bridge at South Fork," and the close-up shows the same modern-looking man from the original photo. Sure, it would be a bit of a stretch, not impossible to say that both are fake, given their different origins, but we do have more evidence of the original photograph's authenticity. In December of 2010, Evgeny Balamutenko and his colleague from Russian television channel NTV determined it was real and unedited with the help of a museum staffer. So my theory? Well, an alien wanted to test out a time travel device in a way that they could have visible proof of it working in the future, but without invading a massive event, causing a scene, ergo why he went in disguise. Imagine if everybody with a time travel device went to the opening day of Disneyland. It'd be pretty obvious. So have you ever been confused by the sight of something weird while driving? Don't worry, you're not alone. Back in 1969, a man named LC and his business associate Bob were driving along Highway 167 towards the oil center city of Lafayette after finishing lunch in the southwest Louisiana town of Abbeville, United States. It was the 20th of October and around 1:30 in the afternoon, and they spotted this old turtleback car going really slow. They were kind of intrigued because they hadn't seen this sort of vehicle a lot before. Heck, I had to look it up myself because I am not exactly the most vehicle-aware person to exist. I exasperated my dad growing up, it was a whole thing. I'm getting better, I promise. My dad's the kind of person who can go on and on about car makes, models, all the specifics, and I'm just sitting there I got nothing. For what it's worth, the vehicle that we're talking about today though would be pretty unique to catch the eye and definitely antique. And even though it looks like a blast from the past, apparently it was in mint condition. So the guys kind of overtook the vehicle, but they wanted to slow right down and just check out the details, see what's going on. The car had a very distinct, large, bright orange license plate with the year 1940 clearly printed on it, which was pretty odd because at the time, antique cars weren't supposed to be on the road unless they were being used for a parade. Well folks, it gets weirder from here. The person driving the car was a young woman dressed in a 1940s dress, complete with a hat and fur coat, and she was accompanied by a small boy who was also dressed in a heavy coat and cap. So as the man got closer to the car, the lady started panicking, frantically looking back and forth as if she didn't know where she was. Elsie asked, do you need help? And she was like, yes, but she never rolled down the window or even looked him in the eye. She was just like, yes, but kept going. After asking her several times to halt the vehicle, the guys finally saw her pull over on the side of the road. So they passed her, pulled over in front of her, but the moment they looked behind them, it was gone, as if it had completely vanished into thin air. Now this was a highway without any traffic, so disappearing like this wasn't gonna happen. Because the guys were shocked and they didn't know how to explain it, they just decided to keep driving on. Now a little while later, while they were still on Highway 167, they saw another new car pass a very old car at a really slow speed. It was apparently so slow that it looked like the cars had come to a halt. So as soon as the new car pulled over in front of the old car, the same thing happened. It stopped and was just, they couldn't believe their eyes. Even the guy in the other car was just you see this too, right? So the three guys now started describing what each had seen while walking around the area in hopes of looking for some sort of evidence. The third guy was we should call the police because this is a missing persons case. Whereas Elsie and Bob were we don't know where anything went. Nobody's gonna take us seriously. And they never saw the vehicles again, which supports my theory that aliens visited the Earth, had no clue the time period, and got beamed right back up, out of here. Alrighty, how about we end today with an alien that just wanted to test out our economy? So on January 28th of 2003, a certain Andrew Carlson was arrested and detained by the police for insider trading on Wall Street. This is crazy stuff. Over a 2-week period in the stock market, he went from having $800 to making get this, $350 million. It's whatever he invested in turned into gold, which is nearly impossible to do. He was arrested by the cops on the allegation that he must have had illegal insider information. But when he was asked, how and why he did it, the cops weren't really expecting what he had to say. He claimed to be a man from the year 2256, and since he was from the future, future, he knew exactly how the stocks were going to perform. Obviously the cops were like, yeah, okay pal. But wait, soon after he was released on bail, he disappeared from the face of the earth, and even after repeated attempts, no one's been able to find him. So was he telling the truth? Also, he predicted the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. Wow, somebody with information from the future disappeared? Where have we seen that before today? It's not like I've mentioned it a couple of times.
Number 5 on this list is John Titor. John is one of the most well-known time travelers and one of the most concrete stories that we have that the practice could be possible. Bustle says, in a thread begun in the fall of 2000 about time travel paradoxes on the online forum, the Time Travel Institute, now known as Curious Cosmos, a user responded to a comment about how a time machine could theoretically be built with the following message. Wow, Paul is right on the money. I was just about to give up hope on anyone knowing who Tipler or Kerr was on this word line. By the way, number 2 is the correct answer, and the basics for time travel start at CERN in about a year and end in 2034 with the first time machine built by GE. Too bad we can't post pictures or I'd show it to you. Now the implication, of course, of this message was that the user, who was going by the name timetravel_0, came from a point in the future during which such a machine had already been invented. Over the course of many messages spanning from that first thread all the way through the early spring of 2001, the user, who became known as John Titor, told his story. He said that he had been sent back to 1975 in order to bring an IBM 5100 computer to his own time. He was just stopping in 2000 for a brief rest on his way back home. The computer, he said, was needed to debug various legacy computer problems in 2036 in order to combat a known problem similar to Y2K called the year 2038 problem. John didn't refer to it as such, but he said that Unix was going to have an issue in 2038, which is what we thought was going to happen back when the calendar took over from 1999 to 2000. Opinions are divided on whether John Titor was real. Some folks think he was the only real example of time travel we've ever seen, while others think it's one of the most enduring hoaxes we've ever seen. I feel like this definitely could be a hoax considering we never actually saw John in person. Granted, if he truly is a time traveler, then he would have probably been told not to see people in person cause it would alter the future in ways that we might not know. I don't know, definitely a weird one here folks. Let me know in the comments down below what you got, hoax or reality. Number 4 on this list is Barack Obama. Yeah, I know folks, this one's a little weird. Now I want to come out and say that Obama himself doesn't claim that he's done this. There is a few people who believe that he has though. Bustle says Andrew D. Basiago and William Stillings stepped forward claiming that they were former chrononauts who had worked with an alleged DARPA program called Project Pegasus. Project Pegasus, they said, had been developed in the 1970s. In 1980 they were taking a Mars training class at a community college in California, the college presumably functioning as a cover for the alleged program, when they were picked to go to Mars. The mode of transport? Teleportation. It gets better too. Basiago and Stillings also said that the then 19-year-old Barack Obama, whom they claimed was going by the name Barry Soetoro at the time, was also one of the students chosen to go to Mars. They said the teleportation occurred via something called a jump room. The White House has denied that Obama has ever been to Mars. Only if you count watching Marvin the Martian, Tommy Vietor, then the spokesperson from the National Security Council told Wired's Danger Room in 2012. So if this is true, then Obama may have been to Mars by form of time traveling? It's pretty wild and out there, and let's face it, most likely not true. But let's just go down the rabbit hole that this could be true. Imagine if the former US president has literally been time traveling this whole time and been into the future. I feel like there is a solid movie premise right there. Some production company has got to pick that one up.
Number 3. Anne Moberly and Elle Jourdain. In 1901, two friends and collegiates, Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, were both teachers at St. Hugh's College in Oxford who were traveling through France on a vacation. Their primary destination was the Palace of Versailles, the former center of political power in France until the Revolution. What was supposed to be a walk through the annals of history became far more literal than either of the women would expect. Taking a promenade through the Petit Trianon, the two claim to have found themselves walking through the 17th century, surrounded by people in period attire, going about their day as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Jourdain claimed that it was as if they'd seemed they were walking through a painting, that it felt as if they were in a living tableau. As they walked through, confused and disoriented, they came forward to a woman sketching in the park who they assumed to be another tourist, who they later claimed was Marie Antoinette, the last queen of France. Shortly after, the pair found themselves back in the palace as if nothing had happened. They had returned and visited Petit Trianon several times, hoping to reignite whatever had occurred. When they returned to Oxford, they produced two separate personal accounts of what had occurred, desperate for answers. In 1911, the two produced a book called An Adventure, under pen names for fear their academic status would be threatened. The two never found answers for what happened to them and were often ridiculed for their belief, their claims being dismissed as a shared delusion, a folie à deux, or nothing more than a tall tale for attention, which seems unlikely from two esteemed teachers. So what really happened then? Did Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain share a hallucination on a trip together? Or did they accidentally walk through time and find themselves in another world, if even for a moment? Number 2, breaking a story 10 years before it happens. In 1932, a pair of newspaper reporters, J. Bernard Hutton and photojournalist Joachim Brandt, had been assigned to cover a story on the shipyard in Hamburg, Germany. Not the most exciting gig, but hey, sometimes that's being a newspaper reporter. The men drove out to the yard, questioned the workers, spoke to the executives, and had finished everything they were sent out to do by about the middle of the afternoon. Presumably bored out of their minds having to document all the excitement of a 1930s shipyard, the men were rattled to hear the screech of aircraft flying up ahead, and found themselves surrounded by warplanes circling around. The workers were fleeing, and the two journalists tried to flee the scene as quickly as possible, making sure to take several photos to take back to the newspaper as proof of an attack, finding it a much more compelling story than what they'd originally been asked to cover. The security personnel insisted the men had to evacuate as soon as possible. The men fled, saving themselves by a hair. But as they escaped the facility, they found something far more disconcerting. The skies of Hamburg were clear. There was no black smoke, no damage, no warplanes, no panic. The men didn't understand. It was as if the battle lasted for seconds. When Brandt developed his photographs, shockingly, it depicted the shipyard as they'd seen it that morning, completely intact. The editor dismissed all of their claims as a farce, assuming his reporters had just stopped to try some local drinks and came up with a wild story. The two never spoke of the incident again. Until in 1943, a story came out about a Royal Air Force raid on a Hamburg shipyard. It was exactly as the men had described to the detail, 11 years after they had seen it. Number 1, the Philadelphia experiment. If there is any one body on the planet that I am easily convinced has a leg up on time travel, it is the US government. In 1943, the US Navy were attempting to experiment with cloaking technology to be able to render something invisible, with their ultimate goal being a full warship. The USS Eldridge was the subject of these experiments. The experiment was to create a high voltage magnetic field around the ship in order to cloak it or something. Again, I'm a host for a YouTube channel. I am the farthest thing from a scientist. The story goes here that the ship vanished, surrounded by a cloud of green smoke. The crew of the Eldridge complained of severe nausea, several of them complaining of mental breakdowns, extreme mood swings, and disorders after the experiment. Some claim to have even been rematerialized, fused into the bulkheads. Of course, everything about the Philadelphia experiment is as classified can get, documents full of blacked out redacted chunks, so we only have the reports of individual crew members to go off of. One service member from the ship, Al Bielek, claims that the invisibility cloak was all a front, and the true experiment was to travel through time, claiming that for moments the ship had traveled 100 years into the future, but what felt like for only 10 seconds. Now, some of Bielek's claims get a bit out there, difficult to follow, but bear with us because they're interesting to listen to. Bielek claimed that the world of the future was a unified utopia of floating cities and clouds, in a world without governments, being ran by a hyper-intelligent AI called the Synthetic Intelligence Computer System. War and all its conflicts had become a thing of the past. Bielek went on to claim that he was involved in the Montauk project as well, a conspiracy theory that alleges, as part of the MK Ultra experiments, the US Army was attempting to research psychological warfare and time travel. Now, obviously, the US government did not acknowledge or give the time of day to any of Bielek's claims, but I mean, why would they? They're not going to come out and say, yeah, you got us. Hands up, we've been experimenting with time travel and this guy is blowing the entire thing for us. Or would they just stand by, say nothing, smile, and just insist that we're all just tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists?